So I'm not a camper, unlike Brent. I've never been able to make it out to be the all-American experience that outdoorsy types claim it should be. For example, when I was in the Cub Scouts, my Order of the arrow didn't quite turn out the way it was supposed to. I was supposed to be carving it from a block of wood to the glow of a roaring fire, and in the morning I was supposed to be eating a fried egg sandwich and drinking hot chocolate. In reality, I never got my fire going. So my eggs stayed raw, my bread stayed white and not toasted, and the hot chocolate stayed cold and dry inside the packet. And because I only had the early morning hours to whittle by, my arrow looked like a dildo. Yes, a dildo. I didn't really know what a dildo was at that point in my life, but I had made one. To the extent that the kid dressed as an Indian, okay, Native American, when he came by to inspect my handiwork, threw it down as fast as I could hand it to him. Because it looked like a dildo. I was 12 or 13 years old at the time, you know, fill in your own jokes, I heard them all. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was I had to wear that arrow around my neck, just like all the other Cub Scouts, all day long, as we did service jobs around the campsite. Yes. So what made me think that buying a tent for my wife for her birthday 30 years later was a good idea? In fact, we had two good camping experiences, once before I bought the tent and once afterward. When I was in college, I was a resident assistant, and I had a guy that lived on the floor that I ran who had parents that owned a Christmas tree farm about an hour and a half away from our school. And we decided it would be a good idea to go have a camping experience one night just out in the woods. Big ass bonfire, lots of alcohol, no tents, no sleeping, just blankets. I didn't really know Colleen all that well at the time. We'd only been dating for about a month, and I didn't really know that camping wasn't truly her cup of tea. But I asked her along, and she said yes, and had a reasonably good time if you discount the fact that she used the bathroom, okay, the tree, once, and only under duress because she really, really had to go. So the second time we had a good camping experience was after we were married, after I bought her the tent, and we had kids, and we decided we're going to teach them how to camp. So we used the tent, we went down to the KOA campground in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And we had a reasonably good time if you discount the noisy people across the campsite that were partying all night long and had music playing. And at the opposite end of the extreme, if you ignore the business guy that was in the little pup tent, had his suits hanging on the bar that the pup tent was hanging on, had his laptop in front of the fire. He had clearly bought that tent for his wife for her birthday, and she wasn't nearly as understanding as Colleen. So now, one other time that wasn't so well, two of my three kids were in the Cub Scouts like I was. My second child, Kyle, I kind of counted on other people's fathers, kind of like that Colonel Brent talked about, to teach Kyle how to camp. But when Brandon came along, my third child, I kind of ran out of excuses. Besides, I had a four-wheel drive pickup truck, I had a great tent, I had a kid. Let's go camping. What could go wrong? Now, Camp William B. Snyder is out I-66 towards Haymarket. It's where the Disney company was going to build the amusement park, the history amusement park, many years ago before they met the disagreeing locals. In the grand scheme of things, the Cub Scouts ended up buying this, well, the scouting in general ended up buying this location. I guess the disagreeing locals decided that little kids learning how to use sharp pointing things like arrows and knives was more amenable than hearing animatronic Indians, okay, Native Americans singing, "It's a white world after all." So Brandon and I made our way out one Friday early afternoon towards Camp William B. Snyder to go camping one weekend. We got there, we set up our tent, We threw in what little gear that we had. We were clearly camping because we were doing it with the bare minimum of gear. Other fathers and their kids had hard scrambled trail food. They had water in camel packs. They had sleeping bags on army cots. And they had a listing of all the local whorehouses on laminated paper. We had 2 or 3 water bottles. We had 4 or 5 granola bars. And we had blankets. We didn't have sleeping bags, but we had a tent that we were camping. So Brandon and I went off to do what Cub Scouts do, like helping little old ladies across I-66, learn how to start fires with blow torches, you know, shit that under normal circumstances gets the cops called, but when it's the Cub Scouts, they give you a merit badge. About 3 o'clock, the Cub Scout High Command decided to shut everything down because there was a storm on the horizon and they wanted everybody in their tents until the storm passed through. By 3:30, it started raining. By 3:40, it's pouring buckets of water every second. By 3:45, I don't know how you pronounce it, whether it's a derecho, big ass storm whipping through. It slayed our tent. Our tent was flat on the ground, well, except for the 2-foot bump in the middle where Brandon was sitting in 3 inches of water, flat on the ground. Me, I'm outside. I'm trying to put this tent up with the derecho whipping around, the rain in my face. I don't know what you say about Cub Scouts, but not another father came out to help. So at one point, I peeked in to see how Brandon was doing. And, you know, I could tell, even though the rain was splashing in his face, that he was crying. And I figured I can do something about this. And so I said, Brandon, I'll be right back. Now, to this day, I swear I heard that little 6-year-old voice say, where the fuck are you going? But I've never asked him right out because I don't really want to know. But where I was going was back to get my truck. I went across the parking lot to get my truck, splashing through the mud and the muck. It was just, you know, rain all over the place. I got my truck. I drove back. I threw that tent in the back of my truck. I placed carefully Brandon in the front of the truck, and off home we went. When we got there, Colleen and my other 2 boys were nowhere to be found. So Brandon and I basically changed our clothes, took our clothes down, laid them out in the basement to dry, laid that tent out to dry, ordered a pizza, and watched a Star Wars movie. Ironically, it was the one where Luke Skywalker is camping with Yoda on the foreboding planet. Best Friday night ever. I threw that tent away, and I haven't been camping since.